I was listening to the New York Times podcast, their daily, and they did a deep dive. There have been a number of these published in various places that I've seen. A deep dive into the food crisis that the war in Ukraine is causing. And they pointed out in this piece, and I'm presumably in the article that accompanies it. I was listening to the podcast as I was walking home yesterday, but they point out in this piece that Ukraine and Russia account, between the two of them, for about 12% of the world's calories. That Ukraine is one of the largest food exporters in the world, as is Russia generally. And that as these, in particular, as the Ukrainian wheat fields are not being planted now as spring is arriving because Ukrainians are fleeing the country and, Russians are blowing up their fields and things, that this is going to create major food shortages, particularly in the Middle East and in Africa, although it's going to be happening all over the world. And you combine this with the fact that global warming has caused massive changes in weather patterns around the world that are reducing crop yields. In some cases, there was an amazing story about what's going on in Honduras that I read just 2-3 days ago that pointed out that there's this, they call it the dry belt. And it stretches right across Central America. It goes through Honduras and Guatemala. And it's an area that had historically been rich, fertile farmland that was producing lots and lots of food. And they are in the midst of a 15 or 20-year drought now, just like we are here in the Pacific Northwest. We're more than a decade into a drought, and our forests are starting to catch on fire. It's happening farther south down in California. Well, it's happening all over the world. And in Honduras, the point of the article was that it's producing a refugee crisis for Honduras because these farmers, their farms are just turning into scrubland and they can't grow anything, and they're losing their farms. But losing your farm, I mean, it is pretty bad, and a food shortage is starting to happen now in Central America as a consequence of it regionally, and a lot of those refugees are showing up on our doorstep, by the way. And, if we want to do something about that, we need to be doing something about the food crisis in Central America rather than let's build another wall. But all around the world, this is going to get worse over the next 12 to 24 months, the next year or two. And by this fall, we're really going to see it bite. And by this winter, frankly, because Putin decided that he wanted to play Peter the Great and put the Russian Empire back together by seizing Ukraine, and probably Moldova. One of the leaked plans that we got out of Russian intelligence was, first we take Ukraine, then we take Moldova. And then they've got basically all the land that's not NATO. So because Putin decided that he was going to do this, now we're going to have this winter food shortages all around the world. It's going to be driving up the price of food around the world, which for those areas that are right now basically being fed by others, Eritrea, for example, parts of Yemen, parts of Sudan and southern Sudan, all around the world. But these are the places where the UN World Food Program right now is really, really struggling. They don't have enough money to buy enough food to feed these people, and millions of tons of grain are going to be taken off the market. Meredith Lee wrote a great roundup on this for Politico, although it lacks some of the detail that I found in the New York Times piece. But she points out that President Zelensky, when he spoke to the United Nations yesterday, he said that Moscow has, quote, provoked a global food crisis that could lead to famine in Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world, and large-scale political chaos in many countries. And that large-scale political chaos is something we should not be taking lightly. You'll recall the Arab Spring, which has now, everybody was celebrating. Oh, yeah, all these Arab countries, they're becoming democracies. Look at this. It started in Tunisia with a street vendor setting himself on fire because the price of wheat had gone up. Well, why had the price of wheat gone up? The price of wheat went up because the desert is moving south in Tunisia, and farmland is no longer producing wheat. And so the price of a commodity goes up. The guy sets himself on fire, says enough of this. The ruling autocrat, the oligarchy that was running Tunisia collapses, and a democratic government gets elected. Well, that seemed like a good thing at first. Egypt got more democratic at first. In Libya, you know, we helped take out Gaddafi, et cetera, et cetera. But now what's happened? Tunisia's democratically elected president just decided that he's going to dissolve parliament and be a dictator. Egypt is now being run by a military dictatorship. This is what happens when countries are hit by crisis. And the crisis that we're having now with global warming and food shortages and you know, forest fires and the drought and things are nothing compared to what's coming a year or two down the road. So we need to do something about this. And we need to do something about it soon. So President Biden announced that he wanted to appropriate, he wanted to start with $1 billion for humanitarian assistance for those affected by the war in Ukraine. Now that's going to get a whole lot bigger down the road. So he puts this relatively small, you know, I mean, $1 billion isn't chicken feed, but actually it literally probably is enough to buy chicken feed for the United States for a month or so, but who knows? But it's you know, it's not a lot of money for our government, $1 billion. He puts this on the table, and Republican lawmakers say, no, we're not going to go along with that. As Meredith Lee points out in Politico, a small group of senators are trying to revive efforts to squeeze $1 to $2 billion in international funding, including some $200 million in global food aid, but the plan crumbled after Republicans demanded the Biden administration reverse a move to lift a Trump-era deportation policy for migrants. Now, when Trump was president during the pandemic, he used Title 42, what's called Title 42. It's a public health order, which says those people from Mexico might be bringing COVID. We're worried about that, so we're going to keep them in Mexico. Well, the people from Mexico aren't bringing COVID anymore. We've got it here. And so Biden is saying, let's stop using public health laws and let's reform our immigration laws. And Republicans are like, no, you got to use the public health laws. And if you don't, we're not going to pay for food that might stabilize other economies and prevent people from slipping into starvation. There are famines going on right now. And the Republicans are like, so what? Chris Coons, the Democrat from Delaware, the senator, he said this is a serious mistake. He said mass starvation is a real impending threat. Lindsey Graham, for God's sake. I mean, occasionally Lindsey Graham says something rational, and he said, these food shortages could trigger mass migrations and political destabilization across North Africa and the Middle East. Well, duh. 60% of Yemen's grain comes from Russia and Ukraine. Lebanon can only store a month's worth of grain right now because of an attack on their silos in 2020 in Beirut. They haven't rebuilt their silos. Global wheat reserves, including in the United States, right now are running lower than normal, literally all over the world, because of global warming, because of changes in climate that are affecting the ability to grow wheat, which is the world's staple crop, wheat, and then that's followed by rice. So we need to do something about this. We need to deal with this, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't involve politics. Republicans saying, "Oh no, we're not going to vote for funding for world health or for world food because of Title 42." Really?